Now it's fair.
At my wife's promotion party, Danica thought it'd be hilarious to introduce me as her ex-husband. No degree, no future, just freeloads off my money. Everyone, including her parents, laughed. I didn't flinch. Just smiled, lifted my glass, and said, "Cheers, this is the last time any of you will see me." The room went dead silent. My name's Colin Jensen, but everyone calls me CJ. I'm 42, a handyman by trade, ex-Navy, and apparently the town joke. At least that's what I learned tonight at the Ocean View Park Pavilion, where half of Millbrook, Maine turned out to celebrate my wife's big promotion to regional director at Coastal Insurance Solutions. The evening started normal enough. I'd spent the afternoon setting up tables and stringing lights while Danica got her hair done. She looked stunning in that black cocktail dress, the one I'd bought her for our anniversary last year when things were still good between us. Or when I thought they were good. "Ladies and gentlemen," Danica had announced, her voice carrying that fake corporate cheer she'd perfected over the past 2 years. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. This promotion means everything to me, and I couldn't have done it without the support of my wonderful friends and family." She gestured toward her parents, Richard and Patricia Whitmore, who stood near the bar looking like they'd stepped out of a country club catalog. Old money, old attitudes, and old grudges against their daughter's choice in husbands. "And of course," Danica continued, her smile turning sharp, "I have to acknowledge my dear Colin here, my ex-husband, well, not officially yet, but let's be honest, who's been such a unique part of this journey." The crowd chuckled. I felt my jaw tighten. No college degree, no real career prospects, but he sure knows how to fix a leaky faucet. More laughter. "I guess we all need someone to remind us what we're working so hard to avoid becoming, right?" The laughter grew louder. I saw Monica Chen, Danica's best friend and office gossip queen, practically cackling. Linda Walsh from HR was recording with her phone. Even some of my former buddies from Charlie's bar were grinning. That's when I stood up. The pavilion fell quiet as I walked to the front, my work boots echoing on the wooden floor. I took the microphone from Danica's manicured hands and looked out at the crowd of faces, some curious, some amused, all waiting for the punchline. "Thanks, honey," I said, my voice steady. That was illuminating. I turned to face the crowd. "You know, Danica's right about one thing. I don't have a fancy degree. I fix things for a living. Pipes, electrical, roofs, whatever needs fixing. But here's what I've learned in 20 years of fixing things. When something's broken beyond repair, sometimes the best solution is to tear it down and start over." The silence was thick now. I could see Danica's face going pale. "So here's to new beginnings." I raised my beer bottle. "And to finding out who your real friends are. Cheers. This is the last time any of you will see me." I drained the bottle, set it down on the nearest table, and walked out. Behind me, I heard Danica's voice, shrill and panicked. "Colin, wait! He's been under a lot of stress lately." But I was already gone, my truck engine turning over in the parking lot. Through the windshield, I could see the pavilion full of people standing around awkwardly, their party mood thoroughly eliminated. Good. As I drove home through the winding streets of Millbrook, past the tourist shops and seafood restaurants that kept our little coastal town alive, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: clarity. For too long, I'd been the good husband, the understanding partner, the guy who didn't make waves. I'd ignored the late nights, the mysterious phone calls, the way Danica had grown cold and distant. I'd ignored a lot of things, but not anymore. I pulled into our driveway, well, my driveway since the house was in my name, and sat in the truck for a moment. The house looked the same as always. A modest 2-story colonial with blue shutters and a white picket fence. I'd restored it myself over the past 5 years, room by room, thinking I was building something permanent. Turns out I was just fixing something that was already broken. My phone buzzed. A text from Frank Morrison, my old Navy buddy who now ran a private investigation business out of Portland. Saw the video. Linda posted it on Facebook. "You okay, brother?" I smiled grimly. Of course Linda had posted it. The woman couldn't sneeze without documenting it on social media. I texted back, "Better than okay. Can you meet me tomorrow? I might need some professional help." "What kind of help?" "The kind you're licensed for." 3 dots appeared, then, "I'll bring coffee. And my good camera." I pocketed the phone and headed inside. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted. I walked through the living room, past the family photos that suddenly looked like lies, and down to my workshop in the basement. This was my sanctuary, a fully equipped woodworking shop with tools I'd collected over 2 decades. Everything had its place. Everything served a purpose. Unlike my marriage, apparently. I pulled out a legal pad and started making lists. First, assets. The house was mine, bought before we married. My truck paid off. The joint accounts would be trickier, but I had options. Danica might have the fancy corporate job, but I had something more valuable. I knew how things worked. Really worked. Second, evidence. I'd been willfully blind, but that didn't mean I was stupid. The signs had been there. I just hadn't wanted to see them. Third, allies. Frank, obviously. Charlie from the bar might be useful. He heard everything in this town. Mrs. Abernathy next door was the neighborhood watch committee all by herself. And fourth, targets. Because this wasn't just about Danica. Tonight had shown me exactly who my real enemies were. I was still writing when I heard her car in the driveway. The front door slammed and her heels clicked across the hardwood floors above my head. Colin? Colin, where are you? I didn't answer. Let her look. Colin, we need to talk. You embarrassed me tonight. I embarrassed her. That was rich. Her footsteps moved through the house, checking the kitchen, the living room, our bedroom. Finally, I heard her at the top of the basement stairs. Are you down there? Colin, this is ridiculous. Come up here so we can discuss this like adults. I set down my pen and walked to the bottom of the stairs. She stood at the top, still in her black dress, but with her makeup smeared and her hair disheveled. She looked like she'd been crying, but I'd learned not to trust Danica's tears. There's nothing to discuss, I said calmly. Of course there is. Look, I'm sorry about what I said tonight. I was nervous, and I had a few drinks, and you showed everyone exactly what you think of me. That's not true. Isn't it? I climbed a few steps, close enough to see her face clearly. Tell me, Danica, when did I become such a disappointment to you? She opened her mouth, then closed it. For once, she didn't have a quick answer. Was it when you got promoted to manager 2 years ago, or when you started working those late nights with Evan Turner? Her face went white. Bingo. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. Fact 1, you've been coming home late 3 nights a week for the past 6 months. Fact 2, it's always the same nights Evan works late. Fact 3, you've been treating me like garbage for months, and tonight you decided to make it public. Colin, you're being paranoid. Am I? Then you won't mind if I ask Frank to look into a few things. Professional curiosity. The color drained completely from her face now. You can't do that. That's invasion of privacy. Actually, it's not. Not when it involves my wife and my marriage. I climbed another step. But don't worry, I'm sure there's nothing to find, right? She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something I'd never seen before in her eyes. Fear. I'm going to bed, she said finally. We'll talk about this tomorrow when you're being rational. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking rapidly across the floor. A minute later, I heard our bedroom door slam. I went back to my lists, adding new items as they occurred to me. By the time I finished, it was past midnight, and I had a plan. Not just for revenge. That was too simple. This was about justice, about showing everyone who'd laughed tonight exactly who they were dealing with. I'd spent 20 years fixing things. Now, it was time to break a few. Frank Morrison arrived at 7 a.m. sharp, carrying 2 cups of coffee and an equipment bag that looked like it belonged to a professional photographer. Which, in a way, it did. You look like hell, he said, handing me a coffee. Didn't sleep much. I led him down to the workshop where I'd spread out my notes from the night before. Thanks for coming. Frank studied the papers, his expression growing serious. At 55, he still looked like the Navy SEAL he'd been for 20 years, compact, alert, and completely unflappable. His PI business specialized in insurance fraud and cheating spouses, which made him perfect for this job. So you want surveillance on your wife and this Evan character, he said. Standard infidelity documentation. That's just the beginning. I pulled out a separate sheet. I also want to know about her finances, her work relationships, and anything else that might be relevant to a divorce proceeding. CJ, I have to ask, are you sure about this? Sometimes it's better not to know. I thought about the laughter from last night, the way even people I'd considered friends had joined in humiliating me. I'm sure, Frank nodded. Okay, but we do this by the book. Everything legal, everything admissible. I'm not losing my license over a messy divorce. Understood. We spent the next hour going over the details. Frank would start with basic surveillance, following Danica to and from work, documenting her activities. He'd also run background checks on Evan and do some discreet inquiries about Danica's recent promotion. "This Turner guy," Frank said, looking at the photo I'd pulled from the company website. "He's young, looks like a gym rat. Regional sales manager, been with the company 3 years, got promoted 6 months ago. Right around the time your wife started working late." "Coincidence, I'm sure," Frank grinned. "I love coincidences. They make my job easier." After Frank left, I had the house to myself. Danica had already gone to work, leaving only a note on the kitchen counter. "We need to talk tonight. D." I crumpled up the note and threw it away. Then I started my own investigation. Danica thought I was just a dumb handyman, but she'd forgotten that I'd been an electronics technician in the Navy. I knew my way around computers, security systems, and surveillance equipment. More importantly, I knew how to be thorough. I started with our home computer, the one Danica used for work in the evenings. She'd been careful to delete her browser history, but she hadn't been careful enough. A few minutes with a recovery program, and I had weeks of deleted files, hotel websites, restaurant reservations, and a dating app called Married But Looking. I stared at her profile for a long time. The photos were recent, taken in our bedroom wearing lingerie I'd never seen. Her bio was a masterpiece of deception. "Successful executive in loveless marriage seeks excitement and passion. Discretion essential. Loveless marriage." After 15 years, I screenshotted everything and saved it to a flash drive. Then I moved on to our phone records. As the account holder, I had access to all the call logs and text message records. Danica had been very busy over the past 6 months. Hundreds of calls and texts to Evan Turner's number, often late at night and on weekends. By noon, I had enough evidence to file for divorce. But I wasn't ready for that yet. First, I wanted to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. I drove to Charlie's bar for lunch. Charlie Brennan had owned the place for 30 years, and it was the unofficial information hub of Millbrook. If there was gossip to be heard, Charlie heard it first. The lunch crowd was light. A few fishermen, some retirees, and Monica Chen sitting at the bar with Linda Walsh. They were deep in conversation, probably dissecting last night's drama. "CJ," Charlie called out as I walked in. "Hell of a speech last night, buddy. You saw the video? Linda posted it on Facebook. Got shared about 50 times already." He drew me a beer without being asked. "You okay? Getting better by the hour?" I took a seat at the far end of the bar, close enough to hear Monica and Linda's conversation, but far enough away to avoid direct contact. "Can't believe he just walked out like that," Monica was saying. Poor Danica was mortified. "She should have seen it coming," Linda replied. "I mean, she's been pretty open about how unhappy she is at home. Still, to embarrass her like that at her own party." I sipped my beer and listened. Over the next 20 minutes, I learned quite a bit. Apparently, Danica had been complaining about me to her coworkers for months. I was holding her back, dragging her down, and completely incompatible with her new lifestyle. More interesting was what Linda let slip about office politics. There had been some controversy about Danica's promotion. Another employee, Sarah Martinez, had been the obvious choice, but she'd been passed over after some kind of incident involving missing client files. "Sarah was so upset," Linda said. "She swore someone set her up, but what could she prove?" "Well, the best person won in the end," Monica replied. "Danica deserved that promotion." I finished my beer and left, but not before stopping to chat with Mrs. Abernathy, who was having lunch at a corner table. "Colin, dear," she said, patting my arm. "I saw that awful video. How are you holding up?" "I'm fine, Mrs. A. Actually, I wanted to thank you." "Thank me?" "For keeping an eye on the neighborhood. I know you see everything that goes on." She blushed slightly. "Well, I do try to stay aware of what's happening around us. Safety, you know." "Of course. I don't suppose you've noticed anything unusual at our house lately? Strange cars, people coming and going at odd hours?" Her eyes lit up. Mrs. Abernathy loved having her observations validated. "Well, now that you mention it, there has been that silver BMW. Comes by on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, sometimes stays for hours. I always wondered who it belonged to." "Silver BMW?" "Yes, with one of those vanity plates. Something about fitness. Gym rat, I think it was." I thanked her and left, my mind racing. Evan Turner drove a silver BMW with vanity plates, and he'd been coming to my house while I was at work. My phone buzzed with a text from Frank. "Got some preliminary info. Can you meet at the storage facility on Route 1 at 3 p.m.? I texted back, "On my way." The storage facility was perfect for a discreet meeting, lots of units, plenty of privacy, and Frank rented one for his surveillance equipment. He was waiting for me in the office, looking grim. "We need to talk," he said, leading me to his unit. "I've been following your wife since this morning, and you're not going to like what I found." He opened his laptop and showed me a series of photos. Danica leaving the house at 8 a.m. Danica arriving at work at 8:30. Danica leaving work at 11 a.m. with Evan Turner. Danica and Evan entering the seaside motel on Route 9. "They're still in there," Frank said, checking his watch. "Been there for 4 hours." I stared at the photos, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. Seeing the evidence was different from suspecting it. "There's more," Frank continued. "I ran a background check on Turner. Guy's got some interesting financial problems, maxed out credit cards, behind on his car payments, facing eviction from his apartment. So he's using my wife for money? Looks that way. But here's the weird part. Your wife's finances are messier than they should be. She's been moving money around, making some unusual transactions. He showed me bank records, obtained through his contacts at various institutions. Danica had opened 3 new credit cards in the past 6 months, all maxed out. She'd also taken a loan against her 401k and borrowed money from her parents. Where's all the money going? That's what we need to find out. But CJ, there's something else. I did some digging into her promotion, talked to a few people at her company. Frank pulled out another file. Remember that Sarah Martinez woman who got passed over? She filed a complaint with HR, claiming someone planted evidence that made her look incompetent. The complaint was dismissed, but I got a copy of her statement. I read through Sarah's account. According to her, crucial client files had disappeared from her computer only to be found later in her personal email account, sent to a competitor. The incident had cost the company a major client, and Sarah her chance at promotion. "Sarah swears she didn't send those files," Frank said. "And she's got some interesting theories about who might have set her up." "Let me guess. Your wife had access to Sarah's computer. She also had the technical knowledge to move files around without leaving obvious traces." I sat back, processing this information. Danica hadn't just cheated on me. She'd sabotaged a colleague to get her promotion. And now she was spending money she didn't have to keep her boy toy happy. "Frank, I need you to document everything. Not just the affair, all of it. The financial irregularities, the sabotage, everything. That's going to take time and money." "I've got both. And Frank, I want you to reach out to Sarah Martinez, see if she'd be willing to talk." Frank nodded. "What are you planning, CJ?" I looked at the photos of my wife and her lover entering the motel, and I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, but it was being replaced by something else. A cold, calculating anger that reminded me of my military days. I'm planning to fix a few things that are broken. That evening, Danica came home at her usual time, acting like nothing had happened. She'd changed clothes and fixed her makeup, but I could smell the motel soap on her skin. "How was your day?" she asked, kissing my cheek like a dutiful wife. "Productive. How was yours?" "Busy. Lots of meetings." She moved around the kitchen, preparing dinner with the efficiency of someone going through familiar motions. "Colin, about last night? What about it?" "I think we should see a counselor. Work through some of our issues." I watched her dice vegetables with precise mechanical movements. "What issues would those be?" "Communication, for one thing. We don't talk anymore." "You're right. We should definitely work on our communication." I pulled out my phone and showed her one of Frank's photos, her and Evan entering the motel. "For instance, you could have communicated that you were planning to spend the afternoon screwing your coworker." She dropped the knife, her face going white. "Colin, I can explain." "Can you?" "Because I'd love to hear the explanation for this." I showed her the dating app profile. "Or this, the phone records. Or this, the financial statements." She sank into a chair, her corporate composure finally cracking. "How did you get all this information? Turns out I'm not as stupid as you think I am." For a moment, she looked genuinely stricken. Then her expression hardened into something I'd never seen before. Cold, calculating, and completely without remorse. "Fine," she said. "You want the truth? I am in love with Evan. I have been for months. And yes, I'm leaving you." Just like that. Just like that. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. "I was trying to be kind about it. But since you want to play detective, we might as well be honest. This marriage has been dead for years, Colin. I've outgrown you." "Outgrown me?" Yes, I'm a successful executive now. I have responsibilities, goals, a future. What do you have? A toolbox and a pickup truck? The contempt in her voice was breathtaking. This wasn't the woman I'd married. Or maybe it was, and I'd just never seen her clearly before. You're right, I said calmly. We are very different people. You're a cheating, lying, sabotaging piece of work, and I'm just a guy with a toolbox. Her eyes flashed. Don't you dare judge me. You have no idea what I've had to do to get where I am. Actually, I have a pretty good idea. Sarah Martinez sends her regards, by the way. The blood drained from her face. What? My friend Frank is very thorough. We know about the files you planted, the client you cost the company, the promotion you stole. She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her mind working, calculating her options. You can't prove any of that, she said finally. Can I? And even if you could, what are you going to do? Report me to HR. I am HR now. File for divorce? Go ahead. I'll take half of everything you own. She smiled, and it was like looking at a stranger. You see, Colin, you may have your little photos and your paranoid theories, but I have something better. I have a lawyer, I have documentation of your erratic behavior, and I have witnesses who saw you publicly threaten me last night. Threaten you? This is the last time you'll see me? That sounds pretty threatening to me, especially coming from a man with military training and anger management issues. I stared at her, finally understanding the full scope of what I was dealing with. This wasn't just about an affair or even a failing marriage. Danica had been planning this for months, positioning herself for a divorce that would leave her with everything and me with nothing. You've thought this through, I said. I always think things through. That's the difference between us. She walked toward the stairs, then turned back. Oh, and Colin? You might want to find somewhere else to sleep tonight. I'm having the locks changed tomorrow, and I'd hate for there to be any incidents. I listened to her footsteps on the stairs, then the sound of our bedroom door closing. Then I went down to my workshop and added several new items to my lists. Danica thought she was the smart one, the one who planned ahead, but she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated exactly how thorough a Navy-trained electronics technician could be when he set his mind to it. She wanted a war? Fine. But she was about to learn that in any war, intelligence wins battles, and I was just getting started gathering intelligence. The next morning, I woke up on the workshop couch to the sound of a locksmith van in my driveway. Through the basement window, I watched a guy in coveralls changing the locks on my own front door while Danica supervised, coffee cup in hand. I smiled grimly and headed upstairs through the interior door, the one Danica had forgotten about, the one that connected the basement workshop directly to the kitchen. The locksmith was working on the front and back doors, but he hadn't touched the interior doors because Danica didn't know they existed. I'd installed them myself during the renovation, along with several other modifications she'd never bothered to learn about. Morning, honey, I said, walking into the kitchen like I owned the place, which I did. Danica spun around, spilling coffee on her white blouse. How did you... The locks? Were changed on 2 doors. This house has 5 entrances. I poured myself coffee from the pot she'd made. But thanks for the wake-up call. Really helped me focus my priorities for the day. The locksmith, a guy named Pete who'd done work for me before, looked confused. Mrs. Jensen, I thought you said your husband had moved out? He has, Danica said quickly. He's just here to pick up some things. Actually, Pete, I live here, I said calmly. This is my house. I bought it before we were married. It's in my name only, and I've never moved out. Pete looked between us, clearly uncomfortable. Look, I don't want to get in the middle of a domestic situation. No problem, I said. Just make sure I get a set of keys, since it's my house and all. Danica's face was turning red. Colin, don't make this difficult. Difficult? I laughed. Honey, you haven't seen difficult yet. My phone buzzed with a text from Frank. Package delivered to your workshop. Check the blue toolbox. I finished my coffee and headed back downstairs, leaving Danica to deal with the locksmith. In my workshop, I found a thick manila envelope in the blue toolbox, along with a note from Frank. Sarah Martinez is very interested in talking. Also, your wife's boyfriend has some expensive habits. Details inside. The envelope contained a treasure trove of information. Sarah Martinez had provided copies of all her communications with HR about the sabotage incident, including emails that showed Danica had been one of the few people with access to the compromised files. More interesting were the financial records Frank had compiled on Evan Turner. The guy wasn't just broke, he was drowning in debt. Credit cards, car loans, student loans, and what looked like gambling debts to some very unfriendly people. According to Frank's sources, Evan owed over $80,000 to various creditors and was facing serious consequences if he didn't pay up soon. No wonder he was interested in my successful executive wife. But the most interesting item in the package was a small electronic device that looked like a USB charger. Frank's note explained that it was a listening device, completely legal for me to use in my own house. All I had to do was plug it into any outlet, and it would record and transmit audio to a secure server. I was installing the device in the kitchen outlet when Danica came back inside, alone. The locksmith was gone, and she was carrying a set of keys. "Here," she said, tossing me a key ring. "Pete made you a set, but this is temporary. My lawyer says I can have you removed from the house within a week." "Your lawyer is wrong. Community property laws don't apply to assets owned before marriage. This house is mine, free and clear." "We'll see about that." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "I'm going to work. I expect you to be gone when I get home." "Where would I go? This is my home. Figure it out." After she left, I called Frank with an update. He was sitting in his car outside Coastal Insurance Solutions, watching the building. "Your wife just arrived," he said. "Looks stressed, and guess whose car is already in the parking lot? Let me guess. Silver BMW with gym rat plates. Bingo. They're not even trying to hide it anymore." "Good. That makes our job easier. Any word from Sarah Martinez?" "She wants to meet this afternoon. Says she has information that could bring down your wife and Turner both." "Set it up." I spent the morning making phone calls and doing research. First, I called a divorce attorney, not just any lawyer, but Margaret Chen, Monica's older sister, and one of the most ruthless family law attorneys in the state. The irony was too perfect to resist. "Colin Jensen," Margaret said when I identified myself. "I heard about your situation through the family grapevine. Monica's been very concerned about you." "I'm sure she has. She says you've been behaving erratically, making threats, acting unstable." "Is that what she says?" "It is. She's worried you might do something dangerous." I smiled. Monica had been busy spreading the narrative that I was the unstable one, the potential threat. It was smart. If I did anything that could be construed as aggressive or vindictive, they'd already laid the groundwork to paint me as the villain. "Margaret, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Are you willing to represent me in a divorce proceeding against Danica?" There was a long pause. "Colin, given the family connections and the potential conflicts of interest, I don't think that would be appropriate." "I understand. Can you recommend someone who might be interested in a case involving infidelity, financial fraud, and corporate sabotage?" Another pause. "That's quite a list of allegations. It's quite a situation. Have you considered counseling? Sometimes these marital issues can be resolved without litigation." "Margaret, my wife is currently in a motel room with her lover, spending money she embezzled from joint accounts to pay off his gambling debts. She sabotaged a coworker to steal a promotion, and she's planning to frame me as an unstable veteran to maximize her divorce settlement. I'm past the counseling stage." The line was quiet for a moment. Then, "You have documentation of all this? Extensive documentation? I see. Well, I can't represent you, but I know someone who might be very interested in your case. Her name is Rebecca Torres, and she specializes in complex divorce cases involving fraud and corporate misconduct." "Is she good?" "She's a shark. She ate my lunch in a case last year, and I've been looking for a chance to see her work from the same side." Margaret gave me Rebecca's number, and I called immediately. Rebecca Torres had a voice like whiskey and steel, and she listened to my story without interruption. "Mr. Jensen, I'm going to be direct with you. If you have the evidence you claim to have, this isn't just a divorce case. It's a complete destruction of your wife's life and career. Are you prepared for that level of warfare?" She fired the first shot. "Fair enough. I can meet with you this afternoon to review your documentation. If everything checks out, I'll take the case, but I have 2 conditions." "What are they?" "First, we do everything by the book. No vigilante justice, no personal revenge schemes. We use the legal system to destroy her, not baseball bats and tire irons." "Agreed." "Second, my fee is $500 an hour with a $10,000 retainer. This kind of case requires extensive investigation and expert witnesses." I thought about the joint accounts Danica had been draining. "Not a problem." "Excellent. Bring everything you have to my office at 3 o'clock. After I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not just for revenge, but for justice. Danica thought she was the smart one, the planner, the one who held all the cards, but she'd made a crucial error. She'd assumed I would just roll over and take it. She was about to learn otherwise. At noon, I met Sarah Martinez at a coffee shop in the next town over. She was a small, intense woman in her 30s with the kind of focused energy that came from righteous anger. "I've been waiting 2 years for someone to take Danica Jensen seriously as a threat," she said, sliding a thick folder across the table. "That woman is a sociopath." The folder contained copies of emails, financial records, and witness statements that painted a picture of systematic corporate sabotage. Danica hadn't just stolen Sarah's promotion. She'd been undermining colleagues for years, stealing ideas, manipulating data, and covering her tracks with surgical precision. "The files that disappeared from my computer," Sarah explained, "I have proof they were accessed from Danica's workstation. ITE logs show someone using her credentials logged into my account at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday night." Why didn't HR investigate? Because Danica was sleeping with the HR director at the time, guy named Paul Morrison. He got transferred to the Boston office right after my complaint was dismissed. I made notes as Sarah talked, building a timeline of Danica's corporate crimes. By the time we finished, I had enough evidence to not only destroy her career, but potentially send her to prison. "Sarah, would you be willing to testify in a divorce proceeding?" "I'd testify at her war crimes trial if you could arrange it." At 3 o'clock, I sat in Rebecca Torres's office, watching her review the mountain of evidence Frank and I had compiled. She was a small woman with silver hair and carnivory eyes, and she went through the files with the methodical precision of a forensic accountant. "This is remarkable," she said finally. "Your wife has been running a long-term con on multiple fronts, personal, professional, and financial. The infidelity is almost the least of her crimes. Can we use it?" "All of it. The infidelity establishes grounds for fault-based divorce, which affects property division. The financial fraud gives us grounds to freeze her accounts and recover embezzled funds. The corporate sabotage, well, that's going to destroy her career and possibly result in criminal charges." Rebecca leaned back in her chair. "Mr. Jensen, I have to ask, are you sure you want to go nuclear? Once we file these papers, there's no going back. Your wife's life as she knows it will be over." I thought about the laughter at the promotion party, the contempt in her voice when she called me a failure, the cold calculation with which she'd planned to destroy me. "I'm sure." "Then let's get to work." We spent the next 2 hours planning the attack. Rebecca would file divorce papers within the week, but first we'd take several preparatory steps. Freeze the joint accounts to prevent further embezzlement. Serve subpoenas on Coastal Insurance Solutions for employment records. Contact the district attorney's office about potential criminal charges. "The key," Rebecca explained, "is coordination. We want everything to hit at once, so she can't mount a defense or cover her tracks. How long do we have?" "Based on what you've told me about her plans, maybe a week before she makes her move. We need to strike first." I left Rebecca's office feeling like a general who'd just planned a successful military campaign. Danica thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers. She was about to discover that I'd been playing chess all along. I'd just been letting her think she was winning. That evening, I was in my workshop when I heard her come home. The listening device I'd installed picked up her phone conversation as she walked through the house. "Told you, he knows about us," she was saying. "He has pictures, financial records, everything." Evan's voice came through clearly on the other end. "How the hell did he find out?" "He hired a private investigator. We need to move faster." "Danica, I can't move faster. The people I owe money to aren't exactly patient." "How much do you need?" 80,000 minimum, and that's just to keep them from breaking my legs." There was a pause. "I can get it, but you have to do something for me first." "What?" "I need you to help me with Colin. He's becoming a problem, and problems need to be solved." "What kind of help?" "The kind that makes him look unstable, dangerous, the kind that gets him arrested." I sat in my workshop listening to my wife and her lover plan to frame me for something that would land me in jail, and I felt the last vestiges of guilt disappear. This wasn't just about infidelity or divorce anymore. This was about survival. Fortunately, I'd learned a few things about survival during my years in the Navy, and I was about to teach Danica and Evan a master class in the subject. The next morning, I was ready. While Danica showered upstairs, I made coffee and checked my phone. Frank had sent me overnight surveillance photos. Danica and Evan at dinner, Evan's car parked outside our house until 2 a.m., and most importantly, Evan meeting with two large men in an alley behind his apartment building. The men looked exactly like what they were, debt collectors with a taste for violence. Frank had managed to get audio of part of their conversation. Evan owed money to a bookie named Sal Torino, and Sal was running out of patience. Perfect. Danica came downstairs dressed for work, her hair and makeup flawless despite the late night. She moved around the kitchen like I wasn't there, gathering her things with efficient, practiced movements. "Good morning," I said pleasantly. She ignored me. "Sleep well? You were on the phone pretty late." That got her attention. She turned to look at me, her eyes calculating. "Were you listening to my conversations?" Hard not to hear when you're talking so loudly. Something about solving problems? Her face went pale, but she recovered quickly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course not." I sipped my coffee. "By the way, I've been thinking about what you said the other night, about me being erratic and threatening." "What about it?" "Well, if I really was unstable, if I really was dangerous, wouldn't I have done something by now? I mean, here we are alone in the house, and I'm just making coffee and reading the newspaper." She stared at me for a long moment, clearly trying to figure out what I was getting at. "Unless," I continued, "someone was planning to manufacture evidence of erratic behavior. You know, stage some kind of incident that would make me look unstable." "You're paranoid." "Am I? Because I have to say, Danica, if someone was planning to frame me for something, they'd better be very, very careful. I spent 20 years in the military learning how to deal with threats, and I take threats very seriously." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. "I'm going to work. Have a good day, honey. Try not to embezzle too much money." The door slammed behind her. I waited 10 minutes, then called Frank. "She's on her way to work and she's rattled. How's our boy Evan?" "Sitting in his car outside his apartment building talking on the phone. Looks stressed." "Good. It's time for phase 2. Phase 2 was psychological warfare. I'd learned in the Navy that the best way to defeat an enemy was to make them defeat themselves. Paranoia, stress, and poor decision-making were more effective than any weapon. I started with Evan's apartment building. The place was a converted warehouse with minimal security and a landlord who didn't ask too many questions. I knew this because I'd done some electrical work there 2 years ago, and I still had keys to the maintenance areas. I didn't break into Evan's apartment. That would be illegal. Instead, I did something much more subtle. I left a note in his mailbox, written in block letters on plain paper. "We know about the money. Pay up or face the consequences." No signature, no specific threats, nothing that could be traced back to me. Just the kind of generic intimidation note that debt collectors might leave. Then I drove to Coastal Insurance Solutions and parked across the street. The building was a modern glass structure that tried to look more impressive than it was. Through my binoculars, I could see Danica at her desk on the 3rd floor, talking animatedly on the phone. I called the main number and asked for Evan Turner. "This is Evan." "Mr. Turner, this is Detective Morrison with the Millbrook Police Department." I'd disguised my voice and was calling from a burner phone. "We've received some information about your financial situation that we'd like to discuss with you." "I'm sorry, what?" "Specifically, your relationship with Salvatore Torino and certain gambling debts." "Could you come down to the station this afternoon?" There was a long pause. "I think there's been some mistake." "No mistake, sir. We'll expect you at 3 o'clock. I hung up before he could respond. Within minutes, I could see Evan at Danica's desk, both of them looking panicked. They talked for several minutes, then Evan left the building in a hurry. I followed him to a coffee shop downtown, where he met with a man in an expensive suit, probably his lawyer. They talked for an hour, with Evan looking increasingly agitated. While they were meeting, I called Coastal Insurance Solutions again. "Sarah Martinez's office," a secretary answered. "This is Colin Jensen. Is Sarah available?" "One moment." Sarah came on the line. "Colin, what's happening? The whole office is buzzing about some kind of investigation." "What kind of investigation?" "Nobody knows for sure, but Danica and Evan have been running around like their hair's on fire. Linda from HR got called into the boss's office, and there are rumors about federal agents asking questions." I smiled. The beauty of paranoia was that it fed on itself. One fake phone call had triggered a cascade of fear and speculation. "Sarah, I need you to do something for me. Can you access the company's internal email system?" "I'm not supposed to." "This is about getting justice for what they did to you." There was a pause. "What do you need?" Send an anonymous email to the compliance department. Tell them there are rumors about financial irregularities in Danica's department and suggest they might want to review recent transactions. That could trigger a real investigation. That's the idea. Colin, are you sure about this? Once I send that email, there's no taking it back. I thought about Danica and Evan planning to frame me, about the years of lies and manipulation, about the promotion party where everyone had laughed at me. Send it. By the end of the day, Coastal Insurance Solutions was in chaos. The compliance department had indeed launched an investigation into Danica's finances. HR was reviewing her personnel file, and the rumor mill was working overtime, spreading stories about federal investigations and criminal charges. None of it was true yet, but it didn't matter. In a corporate environment, perception was reality. I was back in my workshop when Danica came home, and I could hear her on the phone before she even got through the door. Don't know how this happened, she was saying. Someone's targeting us specifically. It has to be Colin. Evan's voice came through clearly on the listening device. He's trying to destroy us. But how? He's just a handyman. Maybe he's not as stupid as we thought. There was a long pause. Evan, we need to accelerate our timeline. If the company investigation goes forward, they're going to find things we don't want them to find. What are you talking about? The Martinez files weren't the only ones I moved around. There are other things, financial discrepancies that could be misinterpreted. Jesus, Danica, what did you do? What I had to do to get ahead, but if they dig too deep, we're both finished. So what's the plan? We frame Colin tonight, make it look like he threatened me, maybe even attacked me, get him arrested, get a restraining order, and then we have time to clean up the loose ends. I sat in my workshop, listening to them plan my destruction, and felt a cold calm settle over me. This was it, the moment when they would either succeed in destroying me or destroy themselves trying. I preferred the second option. I called Frank. They're making their move tonight. Are you ready? Cameras set up across the street, audio recording equipment is in place, and I've got backup standing by. What about Rebecca? She's filed the preliminary papers. Everything's ready to go as soon as we have evidence of their frame-up attempt. Good, because this ends tonight. At 9 p.m., Evan's BMW pulled into my driveway. I watched from the workshop window as he and Danica sat in the car for several minutes, clearly psyching themselves up for whatever they had planned. Finally, they got out. Danica walked to the front door while Evan positioned himself near the side of the house, partially hidden by the landscaping. Danica knocked on the door. Colin, we need to talk. I came upstairs and opened the door. She stood on the porch looking nervous but determined. What do you want, Danica? I want to discuss our situation like adults. Can I come in? I stepped aside and let her enter. She walked into the living room and I followed, staying near the doorway. Colin, I know you're angry and you have every right to be, but this doesn't have to get ugly. Doesn't it? No. We can work something out. A quiet divorce, fair division of assets, no public accusations or embarrassment. What's the catch? No catch. I just want to end this marriage with some dignity intact. As she talked, I could see her positioning herself near the coffee table, where a heavy glass vase sat within easy reach. Her plan was becoming clear. She was going to stage an attack, probably break the vase and claim I'd thrown it at her. Evan would come running in as the witness, and they'd have their evidence of domestic violence. It was actually a pretty good plan. It might have worked if I hadn't been expecting it. You know what, Danica? You're right. We should handle this with dignity. I walked over to the window and opened the curtains wide, giving Frank's cameras a clear view of the room. Then I moved to the center of the living room, well away from any objects that could be used as weapons or evidence. So let's talk about dignity, I said. Let's talk about the dignity of sabotaging Sarah Martinez to steal her promotion. Let's talk about the dignity of embezzling money from our joint accounts to pay your boyfriend's gambling debts. Her face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. Let's talk about the dignity of planning to frame your husband for domestic violence so you can clean up your corporate crimes without interference. She stared at me, and I could see her mind racing, trying to figure out how I knew so much. That's right, Danica. I know about tonight's plan. I know Evan's hiding outside, waiting for his cue to come rescue you from your violent husband. I know about the vase you're planning to break, the bruises you're planning to fake, the whole elaborate frame-up. You're insane! Am I? Evan, why don't you come inside and join the conversation? There was a moment of silence, then the front door opened and Evan walked in, looking confused and trapped. Don't look so surprised, I said. I've been watching you for days. I know about your gambling debts, your meetings with Sal Torino's boys, your desperate need for my wife's money. Evan looked at Danica, clearly panicking. He knows everything. Not everything, I said. But enough. Enough to destroy both of your careers, send you both to prison, and make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of people you are. Danica's composure finally cracked completely. You fool! You think you're so smart, but you don't understand what you're dealing with. I will destroy you. I will take everything you have and leave you with nothing. Will you? Because I have some bad news, Danica. While you've been planning my destruction, I've been planning yours. And tomorrow morning, everyone's going to see exactly who you really are. I pulled out my phone and showed them a video file. This is tonight's conversation, recorded in high definition. Tomorrow, copies go to your boss, your coworkers, your parents, and the district attorney's office. Both of them stared at the phone, finally understanding that they'd been outmaneuvered. You can't do this, Danica whispered. I can, and I will. Unless, of course, you'd like to discuss a different kind of arrangement. What kind of arrangement? I smiled, and for the first time in months, it was a genuine smile. The kind where you both disappear from my life forever. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed for the first time in a week. Danica had spent the night at Evan's apartment, probably trying to figure out how to salvage their situation. They were welcome to try. At 8 a.m. sharp, I walked into Rebecca Torres' office carrying a briefcase full of evidence and a satisfied smile. Mr. Jensen, she said, looking up from a stack of legal documents. You look remarkably cheerful for a man going through a divorce. I have reason to be. I opened the briefcase and showed her the recordings from the previous night, along with the additional evidence Frank had gathered. Rebecca listened to the audio files with the focused attention of a carnivore hearing prey. This is extraordinary, she said when the recordings ended. They actually admitted to planning to frame you for domestic violence, among other things. With this evidence, we can not only win the divorce, but pursue criminal charges for conspiracy, fraud, and attempted evidence tampering. I want it all. Every charge, every penalty, every consequence, Rebecca smiled. Then let's give them a day they'll never forget. At 9 a.m., Rebecca filed divorce papers at the county courthouse. The papers included detailed allegations of infidelity, financial fraud, and corporate sabotage, along with requests for emergency injunctions to freeze all of Danica's accounts and assets. At 9:15, copies of the evidence were delivered to the district attorney's office with a request for criminal investigation. At 9:30, Sarah Martinez walked into her boss's office at Coastal Insurance Solutions and presented a formal complaint about corporate sabotage, backed by 2 years of evidence and witness testimony. At 9:45, Frank Morrison delivered copies of the surveillance photos and financial records to the FBI's white-collar crime division. And at 10 a.m., I walked into Charlie's bar and bought drinks for everyone in the house. What are we celebrating? Charlie asked. Justice, I said, raising my beer, and the end of a very bad marriage. The news spread through Millbrook like wildfire. By noon, everyone knew that Danica Jensen and Evan Turner were under criminal investigation. By 2 p.m., the story had reached the Portland newspapers. By 5 p.m., Coastal Insurance Solutions had issued a statement about personnel changes and ongoing investigations. I was back in my workshop when Frank called with updates. Your wife and her boyfriend are in full panic mode, he reported. Evan tried to withdraw money from 3 different banks this morning, but his accounts have been frozen. Danica showed up at her parents' house with suitcases, but they wouldn't let her in. What about the company investigation? Moving fast. Sarah Martinez provided them with enough evidence to terminate both Danica and Evan immediately. Security escorted them out of the building this morning. Criminal charges? The DA's office is very interested. Apparently, your wife's financial crimes go back several years and involve multiple sufferers. This could be a major case for them. I hung up the phone and sat back in my chair, feeling something I hadn't felt in years, peace. Not happiness exactly, but the deep satisfaction that came from a job well done. At 6 p.m., my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Danica standing on my porch, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her perfect corporate appearance was gone, replaced by wrinkled clothes and smeared makeup. Colin, we need to talk. No, we don't. Please, 5 minutes. Against my better judgment, I let her in. She walked into the living room like a stranger visiting someone else's house. I know you hate me, she began. I don't hate you, Danica. Hate requires caring about someone. She flinched. I deserve that. I deserve all of this. But Evan doesn't. He was just trying to help me. Help you embezzle money and frame me for domestic violence? He was desperate. Those people he owes money to, they're dangerous. If he doesn't pay them, that's not my problem. She stared at me for a long moment, then sank into a chair. What do you want, Colin? Money? I'll sign over everything. A public apology? I'll do it. Just tell me what it will take to make this stop. It's too late for negotiations. It's never too late. We were married for 15 years. That has to count for something. I looked at her sitting in my living room, and for a moment I remembered the woman I'd married. Young, ambitious, full of dreams we'd planned to pursue together. That woman was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. You're right, I said. 15 years should count for something. It should count for loyalty, respect, and basic human decency. It should count for not sabotaging innocent people to advance your career. It should count for not stealing money from your husband to pay your boyfriend's debts. It should count for not planning to have your husband arrested on false charges. Colin, you want to know what 15 years counts for, Danica? It counts for me giving you one chance to disappear quietly before this gets worse. Worse? How could it get worse? I pulled out my phone and showed her a news article from the Portland Press-Herald. Local insurance executive under federal investigation for corporate fraud. The FBI is now involved. The IRS is reviewing your tax returns for the past 5 years. The state attorney general's office is looking into your professional licensing. And tomorrow, the local newspaper is running a story about the promotion party video, complete with quotes from people who were there. Her face went ashen. You're destroying my life. No, Danica, you destroyed your own life. I'm just making sure everyone knows about it. She sat in silence for several minutes, and I could see her mind working through her options. Finally, she looked up at me with something that might have been genuine remorse. I'm sorry, Colin, for all of it. I know that doesn't change anything, but I'm sorry. I believe you. Do you? Do you really? I believe you're sorry you got caught. I believe you're sorry you're facing consequences. I don't believe you're sorry for what you did. She nodded slowly. You're probably right. She stood up and walked toward the door, then turned back one last time. What happens now? Now you face the consequences of your choices, just like everyone else. After she left, I poured myself a drink and sat on my front porch, watching the sun set over Millbrook Harbor. The town looked the same as always. Fishing boats bobbing in the harbor, tourists walking along the waterfront, kids playing in the park where Danica's promotion party had been held just a week ago. But everything had changed. The people who'd laughed at me that night were now calling to apologize or offer support. The friends who'd abandoned me were suddenly interested in getting together. The whole social dynamic of the town had shifted, and I was no longer the joke. My phone rang. It was Frank. Thought you'd want to know. Evan Turner was arrested an hour ago. What for? Turns out those gambling debts weren't just to local bookies. The FBI traced some of the money to organized crime figures in Boston. When they searched his apartment, they found evidence of money laundering and racketeering. What about Danica? Still under investigation, but it's looking like she'll be charged with conspiracy, fraud, and racketeering as well. The DA thinks she was more involved in the money laundering than she's admitting. I hung up the phone and finished my drink. Tomorrow, I'd start rebuilding my life. I'd fix up the house, expand my business, maybe even start dating again. But tonight, I just wanted to sit on my porch and enjoy the peace. At 9 p.m., Mrs. Abernathy came over with a casserole and the latest gossip. Colin, dear, I just wanted to say how sorry I am about everything. I never liked that woman, you know, too ambitious, too cold. Thank you, Mrs. A. And I wanted you to know the whole neighborhood is behind you. What she did was unconscionable. I appreciate that. She patted my arm and headed back to her house, but not before adding, oh, and Colin, that silver BMW hasn't been by in 3 days. I think your problem is solved. I laughed for the first time in weeks. I think you're right. The next morning, I woke up to find my driveway full of cars. Reporters, neighbors, curiosity seekers. Everyone wanted to talk to the handyman who'd brought down the corporate executive. I didn't talk to the reporters, but I did talk to my neighbors. For the first time in years, I felt like I was part of the community again. Charlie stopped by around noon with a six-pack and a proposition. CJ, I've been thinking, You're probably going to be pretty well off after this divorce settlement, right? Probably. Well, I'm looking for a partner in the bar, someone with business sense and a good reputation in the community. I looked at him, surprised. You want me to be your business partner? Why not? You're the most famous guy in town right now, and fame is good for business. I thought about it. A bar wasn't what I'd planned for my future, but then again, nothing about the past week had gone according to plan. Let me think about it. Take your time, but don't take too long. I've got 3 other people interested. That afternoon, Rebecca called with the final details of the divorce settlement. It's better than we hoped, she said. Since the court found evidence of infidelity and financial fraud, you're getting the house, the majority of the joint assets, and substantial spousal support. How substantial? Enough that you'll never have to work again if you don't want to. What about criminal charges? The DA's office is moving forward with multiple felony counts against both your wife and Turner. They're looking at significant prison time. Good. Colin, I have to ask, how do you feel about all this? Are you satisfied with the outcome? I thought about the question. A week ago, I'd been a laughingstock, a joke, a man whose wife was publicly humiliating him while planning his destruction. Now I was financially secure, legally vindicated, and socially rehabilitated. I'm satisfied, I said. That evening, I was cleaning up my workshop when I found the legal pad where I'd first written my plans for revenge. Looking at those lists now, I was struck by how simple it had all been. Danica and Evan had been so focused on their elaborate schemes that they'd missed the obvious. The truth was more powerful than any lie, and justice was more satisfying than any revenge. I tore up the lists and threw them away. I didn't need them anymore. At 10 p.m., I was getting ready for bed when I heard a car in my driveway. Through the window, I saw a police cruiser. Officer Miles got out and walked to my front door. Evening, Colin. Sorry to bother you so late. No problem. What's going on? Just wanted to let you know. We arrested Danica Jensen about an hour ago. Federal charges, multiple felonies. She'll be transferred to Portland tomorrow for arraignment. How is she? Honestly, she looked relieved, like she was tired of running. After Officer Miles left, I sat in my living room and thought about Danica. Despite everything she'd done, despite all the pain she'd caused, I felt something unexpected. Pity. She'd had everything, a successful career, a comfortable life, a husband who loved her, and she'd thrown it all away for what? Money, status, a younger man who was using her. In the end, she'd destroyed herself more completely than I ever could have. I turned off the lights and headed upstairs to bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new possibilities. But tonight, for the first time in months, I would sleep peacefully in my own bed, in my own house, in my own life. The promotion party had been exactly 1 week ago. In that time, I'd gone from joke to victor, from sufferer to survivor, from broken man to whole one. Not bad for a guy with just a toolbox and a pickup truck.